You wake up with a headache. Nothing unusual. You roll over, and that's when you feel it. A swelling in your groin, hard and hot. It's about the size of an egg. You press it. Pain shoots up through your hip. It's September of 1348. You live in London, and you have just caught the Black Death. You don't know it yet, not for certain. Not this morning, but your body already does. Let's walk through what happens next, hour by hour, using the actual medical records and chronicles, and skeletal evidence left behind by people who lived through the worst pandemic in recorded history. First, the numbers, because they set the stage for everything that follows. The Black Death killed 75 to 200 million people across Eurasia and North Africa between 1347 and 1351. In England alone, between 1/3 and 1/2 of the population died. London, the largest city, was hit especially hard because density was the disease's best friend. Narrow streets, shared wells, entire families sleeping in single rooms. Your living conditions made the disease's job easier. Here's a detail almost nobody knows. People living through it never called it the Black Death. That name wasn't widely used until centuries later. Contemporaries called it the Great Mortality, or simply the Pestilence. They didn't have a catchy title for it. They just had to survive it, one household at a time. The plague arrived in Europe via the Black Sea. Ships loaded with grain and cloth sailed west, unknowingly carrying infected rats and fleas. It moved north and west with terrifying speed. By autumn of 1348, it was in London. Before the headache, before the swelling, there was probably a flea bite. You never noticed. Fleas lived on black rats and thatched roofs. They were the most common vector, carrying the bacterium from animal to human. You didn't need to touch a sick person. You just needed to live in a city where rats and people shared the same walls. So what actually happens to your body? The swelling you felt this morning is called a bubo. It usually appears in the groin, armpit, or neck, where your lymph nodes fight the infection. This is bubonic plague, caused by a bacterium called Yersinia pestis, though nobody in 1348 knew that name. What did people in London think was happening? Most physicians believed in the theory of miasma, the idea that disease traveled through foul-smelling air. Some blamed a rare planetary alignment, claiming it had poisoned the atmosphere itself. This was the mainstream scientific consensus of the day. Your treatment will be based entirely on this wrong idea. Let's reconstruct a physician's visit. He might carry a nosegay of herbs, believing the pleasant smell could ward off bad air. He examines your bubo. He may lance it with a hot iron. This often introduced additional infection. He may bleed you to drain corrupted blood. Following theories dating back to the Greek physician Galen, some treatments actively made your final hours worse. Bloodletting could accelerate shock. Poultices made from dried toad or human waste caused additional tissue damage and agonizing pain. They likely shortened the lives of their patients. This wasn't malice, just a wrong map of reality. Your fever climbs. Your tongue turns thick. Your heart races even as you lie still. Dark patches spread beneath your skin. The subcutaneous bleeding earned the disease its grim nickname. Child mortality climbed dramatically. A household could lose every child within a fortnight. Outside, the streets have gone quiet. Markets stand half empty. Church bells toll almost constantly for burials. London itself is transforming into something unrecognizable. The bonds between neighbors and family members began to dissolve. Brothers abandoned brothers. Parents avoided dying children. It attacks the assumptions an entire society relies on. People believed the entire population might be wiped out. Existing parish graveyards filled within weeks. Emergency burial grounds were opened to handle plague dead at an unprecedented scale. Excavations uncovered mass graves with orderly rows. Survivors tried to maintain dignity and order. DNA testing confirmed the presence of Yersinia pestis. Many buried there were relatively healthy before the plague. The disease didn't need a weakened host. It could kill people at the peak of health. Picture your own burial. Your body is carried by cart to emergency grounds. There is no time for individual funeral rites. A priest may say a brief blessing over the pit. This was not disrespect. It was survival mathematics. Clergy were dying too, at a startling rate. Their vocation put them in direct contact with the dying. Groups known as flagellants publicly whipped themselves, believing visible suffering might turn away divine wrath. The plague changed the economics of an entire continent. Labor became desperately scarce. Surviving peasants could demand higher wages. The crown attempted to freeze wages by law, but it largely failed due to economic pressure. This resentment simmered for decades, leading to the Peasants' Revolt of 1381. Land inheritance patterns across England shifted. Dozens of villages were abandoned outright. Even the church was forced to adapt on the fly, permitting lay people to hear the confessions of the dying. Let's go back to you lying in your bed. If you survive, your fever will break within a week. If not, death occurred within 2 to 7 days. Pneumonic plague could kill within 24 hours. There was no cure. Every treatment offered to you was essentially a guess. Survival depended on factors nobody could measure: general health, bacterial strain, and sheer, blind luck. The disease shaped human immune systems for generations afterward. Now, here's the mirror back to your own life. Do you instinctively cover your mouth when you cough? Do you step back from someone who sneezes? Modern public health guidance has roots in plague-era practice. The word quarantine comes from 40 giorni, meaning 40 days of mandatory isolation. Distance and time were the only tools they had. The instinct that invisible things pass between bodies was right. It just took 5 centuries to prove why. You were running software written in blood by people who had no idea what a bacterium was. You've likely lived through a smaller version of this instinct. Empty streets, closed markets, people measuring distance between each other. The disease changes across centuries. The underlying human response does not. Londoners in 1348 were doing exactly that, armed with nothing but observation and fear. That headache could be the first sentence of the last week of your life, or the opening line of a story about surviving.